my sweet friends, and welcome to episode 3 of the Sundress Sew Along. My name is Becky, and I thank you so much for joining me today. In today's episode, we are going to be sewing this adorable dress, which is a vintage 1970s McCalls Reproduction 8596. And it features a lovely upper bust band, a deep V tie closure, crisscross straps in the back, and you'll even make your own little belt. I know you're going to absolutely love all of the details in this adorable dress. I had considered making a removable snap-in modesty panel for the front, but as a 60-year-old woman, I do not feel uncomfortable in this dress. I do not feel that the closure is overly exposed. I really like how this turned out. As for the next pattern in our series, I'm actually going to be waiting until spring of next year to do this because I have got to get my Christmas sewing done. Well, there is lots of fun in store today, so let's get this project started. After cutting out your pattern pieces and also transferring all of the markings onto your fabric, our first step is going to be to sew our darts. So we are going to fold along the solid line and bring the two dotted lines together. Then we're going to pin that into place. Pinning along that line, then making sure that the pins are in the same spot on the front and the back so our dart is going to be even. Beginning at the top edge, which is the widest point of your dart, also adding in some back stitches to secure that edge, and stitching right along that broken line. And as you come to the point, you're going to stitch off the fabric using no back stitches here. Then you want to leave some long thread tails on that pointed edge of your dart. Tie a loose knot with those threads that you left at the point of your dart so they don't come apart when you're wearing your dress, and clip those threads. Then I use a pressing ham to press my dart nice and flat, and also to press the bulk of that dart toward the center front of your fabric panel. And if you don't have a tailor's ham, you can use a rolled up hand towel, and that just gives a nice shape to your darts. For our next step, I used fusible interfacing, and I have already applied that to the back of my pieces to save time in the video. I have made a mistake. I should not have applied my interfacing to the backs of pieces number 9 and 10. The interfacing should have been a standalone that was basted in by itself. You should either use sew-in non-fusible interfacing. You can cut extra pieces and fuse this to itself to create your interfacing. Or you could use any type of lightweight fabric to act as your interface as well. The construction does not change, it's just I made the mistake and applied that when I should not have. But thankfully I had enough fabric left to cut those pieces again. Carry on. And then you'll take that piece number 9, trim the top off of that corner, and then you are going to pin it to the wrong side of your fabric. That's the right side. That's the wrong side. Then we're going to go to the machine and machine baste it into place. Basting stitches are longer stitches, so I have set my stitch length to 4. Pivot when I get to that first edge, and I'm going to stitch down to the next edge and pivot when I get there, and then continue stitching down this side of the interfacing. And then you'll do the same thing to stitch on the interfacing on your other front panel as well. Then set your machine back to your standard stitch length after stitching your interface panels to your front panels. Then take those panels right sides together, and we're going to pin that center front seam. Then stitch from the bottom edge all the way up to the circle that you have marked on your fabric, and remember to backstitch here and when you begin your stitching as well. And because this is just a long straight stitch, I will be doing this off camera to save time in the video. And then you're going to press that seam open. Then you'll take your 2 back panels, which is piece number 3, place those right sides together and pin them end to end because you're going to stitch the center back seam. Once again, because this is just a continuous straight seam, I will be doing this off camera, but when you stitch, remember to start and end your stitches with some back stitches to secure them into place. And press that seam open. And then take your back facing, which is piece number 10, and put it onto the wrong side of your back panel, matching up the notches along the top edge. And once again, I have set my machine to 4 as my stitch length. And I'm just going to stitch all along the top edge here at 5/8 inch seam allowance to baste my back facing into place. And once that is basted into place, make sure to return your machine to your standard stitch length. Then take your front and your back panel right sides together and pin your side seams together. And now you'll go to your machine and stitch from the top edge all the way down to the hem edge with your 5/8 inch seam allowance. Then press those side seams open and trim down your inner facing. Then take both of your upper band pieces, which is piece number 5, right sides together, matching up your notches, and pin that into place. We are now only going to stitch along the unnotched edge of our band. Stitching at 5/8 inch, begin with some forward and some back stitches. Again, stitching all the way down the unnotched edge of your band. And as you come to the edge, remember to do some back stitches to secure your stitching into place. Then I press my line of stitching. Then you grade that seam allowance by cutting one side shorter than the other. Then turn your band right side out and we're going to give that seam a good press. Then work that seam flat and press. And then I transferred my markings that were on the inside to the outside to make those easier to see when I am putting the garment together. And we're doing a basting stitch along the raw edges. And I'm doing that at the 1/2 inch seam allowance this time. Then after basting the raw edges, I set my machine to 3.5 stitch length, and we're going to stitch very close to the edge to top stitch our band so that doesn't roll out on us as we are wearing our dress. And that looks fantastic. And set your machine back to your standard stitch length. And then you want to press your top stitching. Then match the raw edges at the top of your dress with the raw edges at the top of your band. And those large circles should be matched to your side seams. And then you have other notches that you will match as well. And pin all of that into place. After pinning on the band, the instructions tell us to hand baste this in place, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to my machine and do a long basting stitch, and I'm going to do it at 1/2 inch instead of the 5/8 inch along the seam line. And now we're going to make our ties. First, we're going to fold up a 1/2 inch on each edge and press that down. Then after pressing in each edge, you are going to fold your tie in half and press that crease in. Then press each raw edge into your center crease, and you'll do that on both sides. Then fold it on the center crease and press that down again. Pop a couple of pins in there to hold it together, and then you're going to edge stitch all the way around the tie, starting first on the open edge to close that opening, then continuing to top stitch all the way around. So when you're finished, it looks like this. And then press your stitching, and then you will pin or clip those in place on the outside of your front bodice where your pattern markings were. Then go to your machine and stitch a basting stitch at the 5/8 inch mark across the top of each one of your ties. Next, we will make our shoulder straps. So you'll take that piece and fold it in half. And you've got a notch here at the bottom that you'll need to match up. And the mark at the opposite end that was on the inside, I transferred to the outside. Then you'll pin everything into place. And this raw edge that is closest to your notch is going to be left open for turning. And I just put an X with my pins to indicate that's not going to be stitched. Then go to your machine and stitch a 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way down, pivoting and finishing at the diagonal edge on the other end. Then grade your seam allowances by cutting one side shorter than the other to eliminate bulk, and then we're going to turn it right side out. This little blunt end stick came with my bag of polyfill, and I like to use this to be able to push and turn things right side out. So kind of open up your closed end there, and you're going to use that to begin pushing that fabric and pulling that over itself. Takes a second to get it started. And then once you've reached that out the other end, you can remove the stick and then work the rest of that fabric until you've turned your strap. And then I send it back through the other end and gently poke out those corners. Then I'll take just the tip of my iron and lightly run it along that seam. Then roll the seam to get it nice and flat and press as you go. Find your pattern markings at the top of the bodice. Make sure that your creased edge is facing toward the center front of your bodice. Place those raw edges evenly and pin or clip into place. And then go baste those into place. And now we're going to pin together our back fabric facing with our front fabric facings. And thank goodness I had enough of this fabric left over to cut these pieces again after I had messed up earlier in the video. And we've got notches we're going to match up. And with those pinned on the side, not all of that fabric is going to line up with each other. You will have some extending past the seam. Then come down to the bottom front here, matching those notches. Then you're going to go and stitch from the bottom edge to the large circle on your center front. And you will also going to stitch your 5/8 inch seams on each of your shoulder seams to join your back and your front facings. And then press those shoulder seams open. And with right sides together, you're going to pin it all the way around your upper bodice. Your instructions tell you to finish the lower edge of that facing. And if you want to zigzag, you should do a zigzag stitch first, but I am going to be using my pinking shears, so I'm just going to stitch it on first and then use my pinking shears to finish this lower edge. And I've taken off my platform to be able to work the dress around the free arm of my machine here. And we are going to begin at the large circle at the lower front bodice, making sure that you have your ties out of the way, and we're stitching a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So we'll come forward a few stitches and back stitch, and then just stitch that 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around the top of our bodice. Pivot at your corners, and you will end at the large dot on the other side of your front bodice here. Then after stitching, I clipped the corners, graded the seams, and finished off the lower edge of the facing with my pinking shears. And now you're going to take your seam allowance and your facing, I'm going to press that away from your front bodice pieces. So you're not going to be able to do that on the corner there. And you'll just do that all the way around this upper edge. And now you're going to go to your machine and do what is called understitching. And you will be stitching this facing to the seam allowance. And that is going to keep this from rolling out on you as you're wearing your dress. Now you will not be able to get all the way down because you've got your corner here. So you'll stitch from here to here, bypass the corner, and then start again here and stitch all the way around that facing. Skip this corner and sew this facing as well. And I just use the inside of my presser foot to keep my stitches straight. And now we're going to take that facing and turn it to the inside. So we've got the facing on the inside and then our band on the outside. And give that a good press. And I'm going to use the blunt end of a bamboo skewer to get in there and really push out the corner of my top bodice. Now you're going to go to your machine and you are going to top stitch beginning below your band down one edge across the bottom V opening and then back up the other side, ending below the band here. So that top stitching is just going to hold everything down and it's going to keep everything nice and neat when you're wearing your dress. And then at the side seams and also at the center back seam, I went under the band and I stitched down. So this facing stitched down to each side seam and it's also stitched down to the center back seam, so that is not going to roll up. Before we move on to the elastic casing at the waist, I have finished my seams to prevent all of this fraying. And this is a faux French seam. And I do that by taking the raw edges of the seam and pressing them to the inside of the seam, and I pin that into place. And then I stitch very close to that edge, capturing both sides to give that just a beautiful finished look on the inside of my garment. And you do not have to do this. You can zigzag those edges. You can use your pinking shears or a serger if you have it. You just want to do something to finish off those raw edges, again to prevent all of that fabric from fraying. To make pinning your bias tape to those casing lines on your dress a little easier, you want to put something solid inside your dress. I'm just using a plastic grid here. Pin that all the way around your dress, starting at a side seam, and make sure that the top edge of your bias tape is resting against that top casing line. And you want to leave about 1 inch or 2 free at both ends at one of your side seams. Then you will stitch very closely to those folded edges on your bias tape, making sure that you leave a nice opening for the insertion of your elastic, folding those edges under when you stitch, so that leaves a nice clean line that we are going to hand stitch after we put our elastic in. And I did trim down this front facing area here, so I did not cover it with my bias tape. Cut some elastic that feels comfortably around your waist, and I'm actually using an elastic threader, but if you don't have one of these, you can use a safety pin, and you're going to need a safety pin anyway to pin the free end so it doesn't go all the way through your casing. And you just begin feeding that through. I love using this. It just makes it so easy to feed that elastic through that casing. And as you're feeding that through, make sure you pin that free end of your elastic so it doesn't go through as you are putting the rest of the elastic through your dress. Then after you've inserted your elastic, lap them one over top of each other about an inch and stitch those edges together. And then work that elastic evenly through the casing. Then take needle and thread and hand stitch this opening closed. And that is just looking so cute. Now the next step is to do the buttonhole, which is on the back underneath your band. I am not going to be able to walk you through the process on the machine because each machine is different in the way that you prepare a buttonhole. So refer to the owner's manual of your particular brand of machine so you will be able to stitch that buttonhole. And if you have never stitched buttonholes before, just practice on some fabric before you actually do it on your dress. So I've got my buttonholes and my buttons done, and I love the way that the band just hides all of that underneath there. That is so super cute. Now onto our tie. So take your tie and fold it right sides together, pin it in place, making sure to leave a section open in the middle for turning. And this time you will be stitching a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Clip your corners and trim your seams, except for the part where you left open. You want that entire seam allowance. That makes it easier for that to be pressed under and stitched after turning. So then go ahead, using your opening, and turn your tie piece right side out. And instead of hand stitching that opening closed like our directions suggest, I just top stitched all the way around the outside of the belt. That way it looks like the tie's on the front of the dress. Now all I have to do is try it on and decide how short I want to hem the dress. Because I'm a shorter gal, I do prefer the length at the knee. And in keeping with those 70s vibes, I have paired it with some big vintage chunky platform shoes. And I just love all the details on the dress. I am so happy with how it turned out. And I love pairing a cute little sundress with a cropped denim jacket. Such a nice casual look for running errands on the weekend. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been my pleasure to sew with you. And until next time, my sweet friends, be blessed.